You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Daniel Hees. Did I say that properly?
Yeah, you're one of the few that gets it right the first time. So God bless you for that.
Bam. Thank God. School taught me something. It taught me pronunciation a little bit. Let's see if I can keep that through with the rest of the podcast. So, Daniel, tell me a little bit about yourself, man.
So I am a producer and performer and activist in Southern California. I'm SoCal born and raised, so California is my heart. But yeah, I do a lot of activism and work in the poetry community and the homelessness community and the hospice community, and I do all kinds of stuff. So try and stay busy.
So what types of stuff do you do with the homeless community?
So I do a lot of different things, but mainly what I do is I work with a shelter. We're out in Pomona. We are called Hope for Home. So we are a nonprofit organization. We're actually a coalition of several nonprofit organizations. I work specifically with Volunteers of America, but we're trying to facilitate in Pomona, California, a one-stop homelessness recovery shelter. So the concept is you get 90 days, you have a bed for 90 days. It's an open style bunk situation. We have about 150 participants at any given time. But the goal is to provide everything from mental health assistance, bureaucratic assistance, so paperwork and SSRI and all of that, as well as like art therapy and everything that essentially that you come to the shelter, we have all of the resources to hopefully get you back on your feet.
You know what's crazy when you look at the idea of homelessness? That really honestly should not be a thing. We do stuff like take care of people when it comes to like getting them suits for job interviews and stuff. But I'm like, if you did what you're doing, like a 90-day program, it's testing people. It's letting them know that if they're given the option to improve their life, if they'll truly take that option or they'll choose to stay in a slump.
Yeah, word. And the one thing you'll hear me say whenever I did it earlier, but whenever we reference any of the people that are living at the shelter, they are not residents, they are participants. Because we do believe that if you encourage people and empower people to actively get their shit together, I guess, for lack of a better word, they will. And if you give them the opportunity to do it for themselves, by themselves, with help, they will often. So the homelessness issue in this country has reached far and broad. It's not just people struggling with mental illness. It's not just people that are struggling with addiction. At this point, we are all just a couple bad choices away from homelessness. So.
Yeah, it's like you see. Well, the economic environment that we're in is not very suited for living really anymore. It seems like everybody's got to work 2 jobs, 3 jobs just to be able to kind of survive. You used to be able to scrape by.
Yeah, and you can't really do that, let alone like buy property or own anything. It's this generation is faced with a huge uphill battle with finance.
You know what's crazy is the fact that if you go to Hawaii or someplace, they have a literally homeless population like rise epidemic, only on the concept of it's so the environment there is completely different than most of where you see a lot of homelessness. Like if you thought of a place like New York or somewhere where there's homeless people on the side of the street, it's completely different. Those people choose to be homeless on the concept of they're living right off the land. It is so comfortable. Yeah. It is so like I saw people spread out across lawns. I saw people like just enjoying it. I literally saw a group of hobos talk about the nicest curbs to sleep on in different streets. I was like, what's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing I like to avoid too. I don't like to use the word hobo or a bum. Essentially, they are homeless people always. But we have a similar thing in California because we have such good weather. That people come here to be homeless essentially because you can just live on the street and it's nice and it doesn't rain too much. It never snows. So the weather and all of that definitely affects the population where they go.
So how did you get an Instagram name like Chubby Fat? The Chubby Fat.
Yeah, so shouts out. I am at the Chubby Fat on Instagram. So I'm also a producer and an artist. I host a comedy show. It's a podcast called Chubby Fat. You can find that wherever you get podcasts. Just search Chubby Fat. So yeah, I host a comedy show called Chubby Fat, and that kind of just took over. That was the Instagram I used the most. So that's kind of just what I rock with. It's become sort of a moniker for me in the performance community out here because everybody's done the show. So it's become a nickname of sorts. But yeah, I host a comedy show called Chubby Fat. So
What type of things do you
that's where that
talk
comes
about
from.
in your podcast?
So I host two podcasts, actually. I host Chubby Fat. So a rundown of that is we started that. I've been podcasting for about 10 years now. I was an early adapter. I've had a bunch of different shows, but this current show we've been doing probably about 4 years now. And what we do on an episode is we invite different artists and activists and poets. And I work in the poetry community a lot. So we have a lot of poets, a lot of comedians, a lot of rappers, a lot of hip hop stuff. But we have a guest on. We do a soda review. So we review some kind of specialty or artisanal or seasonal soda. We give it a score, and then we play a couple games. So I have a co-host, Harold, and then the guest plays against them. You're trying to win Chubby Fat, if you will. But yeah, it's just an opportunity to laugh, to giggle. As an activist, as someone that's actively involved in the poetry community, we are very serious, often even pretentious, dare I say. But I just wanted to facilitate a space for people to laugh and giggle and forget about bullshit for an hour or so.
Yeah, it's hard to find like a sense of relaxation in a world that seems a little bit tense, you know?
Yeah, and again, like as an activist, I am super involved. As poets, we are often involved in social causes and things like that, and we talk about that ad nauseum. So I wanted to just give artists a place to just have fun and giggle and not take themselves seriously and just talk shit.
For me, I kind of kept this little bit of a secret, but I actually read a little bit of poetry myself. I find it fascinating, just the words I can come up with and the structure I can put them in. And also like nothing's like different than when you read a really good poem like Robert Frost, Those Winter Days, like hearing that, like that inspired me to really write, because the images I was able to kind of conceive in my mind with that whole just telling and counting of these words, just going in perfect order, that literally sparks this imagery in my head. And I find like at 2:00 in the morning, having trouble sleeping, like there's a nice rain outside, I'm able to crack the window and then just sit there with a pen in front of like a piece of paper, and these words just start coming out. And I'm just like, it's amazing, the whole process of it. But people see it as like, oh, you write poetry? Well, you're so pretentious. I'm like, that doesn't mean I'm going to hold a wine glass in my hand and talk about Pinot Noir for 4 hours. That means I'm interested in this way my brain is thinking, this process level. But a lot of people like just make fun of it and chalk it up to ridiculousness, which makes it, for me, not be able to openly express it.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the work we do at Clique. So I host a poetry podcast called Clique, PENCLIQUE. We're on YouTube. We're everywhere you get podcasts. But the YouTube show is very high production. We're trying to do fun, dynamic things with poetry. And that is kind of our mission, because you do have, in the States, at least in America, you have this perception of poetry as being pretentious or high society or inaccessible. So our mission with Clique is to try and create exciting access points for people to find poetry, because like you said, poetry is very easily inspirational and it's easily accessible to new artists. So it doesn't take a lot to get going on your poetry journey beyond just sitting down and thinking for a little while and putting it on paper. And then from there, there's a whole world to explore, of technique and format and of context and content. So.
Do you see a lot of like modern day poetry? Do you find that the weirdest thing is that they kind of stick on the concept of what's going on in the world around us? It's like kind of like news reporting in a way, but it's seen at least with some of the poetry I've read from people that do poetry nowadays, creating their own, they kind of focus on like the things going on in the world, like the society stuff that not completely everyone's aware of, that people are walking around with like a mask. They're not truly being themselves anymore. And creativity is a little bit lacking in the form that we try and structure ourselves off people that we shouldn't be structuring ourselves on, like celebrities and these types of things.
Yeah, and that's so what you're describing is really real in like the spoken word and slam community. That's kind of where I find my roots. So because spoken word and performance poetry started as a means of social expression and revolution, it kind of never delineated too far from that. So even now you have a lot of spoken word pieces that are about social justice or social injustices, if you will. And it is a lot of commentary. It is a lot of look at society, look at the ugly parts of it, look at the good parts of it, celebrate the ugly parts. But yeah, you do get quite a bit of that in the spoken word community as well. There is this focus on, again, like I said, the social injustices that we see. But like I said, a lot of that comes from a long tradition. You have the Watts Prophets, and you have a lot of hip hop and early spoken word that is rooted in the Black Revolutionary. It is a Black Revolutionary art in this country. So at least spoken word is. So you do have a lot of that that's carried over into this generation with the current social climate and the left in the state that it's in. It's definitely using poetry quite a bit to make its point. So
I do agree with the fact that it is kind of seen as a Black culture type of thing when it comes to poetry and spoken word, only on the concept of it feels like for some reason they're given a pass. Like a rapper, nobody looks at a rapper and says, they're doing all this because their life is perfect. Nobody says that. They show true emotion. That was a way for people to express themselves through an art form that they created based on the fact that there was nothing for them, or not even them, just people that were struggling through something to be able to get their own types of beats out there. They started by mixing tracks together to be able to create this type of emotion they were feeling, is where DJing came in and all these types of sorts. But when you come to like saying spoken words, like, I don't know, like Dave Chappelle, his comedy special that came out got a lot of shit for it, but a lot of people said it would have been worse if he was white. That is true, only on the concept of we still hold race so damn, like we hold it so damn accountable to things like the fact that somebody can say something of a different skin color and give him a little bit of a pass just because he is of that color. For me, I'm white. I don't see race. I'm sorry. I really don't. I know what it's like to have white privilege. I know what that's like because I've literally been a minority every single day of my life. And the fact of all the jobs I've surrounded myself and the kind of the culture I surrounded myself with, I've always vibed with, I didn't look at the barrier of race as a thing. So when someone comes up and does a poetry like myself that would be white, and you see it as a Black culture type thing, I wanted to kind of get your insight on this. I think it's the amount that people hold the bar. We hold things accountable, like looks, these types of things that we choose to structure our lives on. And it's not fair because I can tell you, I can been through a shit ton of pain. I've been through a whole hell of experience. And you can hear that from anybody, depending on if they've actually went through it or not. But you have to sift out through the bullshit. You have to understand when someone is faking something. When you're writing a poetry and you haven't experienced anything and you're writing about the cruelness of the world, all these types of things, and then as soon as you put your pencil down, your pen down, whatever you type with, write with, then you're on a yacht and you're doing all this stuff. Like you don't know that true pain. You can't, like, it's like the movie Dewey Cox when the kid walked up, "Can I try and play the blues?" And he goes, "Boy, you haven't learned anything about the blues. You haven't lived a life that has any sadness in it." And he goes, "I think I have some sadness." And then he goes up and starts playing like this 90-year-old blues like singer. And they're like, "Holy shit." And he's like, "That's pretty good." Like, cause we all experience something painful. We all experience this. Life does get a little bit boring sometimes, which is why people focus on comedy. They focus on trying to create laughter in other people's lives because they feel that's what they need to kind of succeed for themselves, if that makes any sense.
yeah, it does to some degree. I do believe in individualism. I do think that we all have struggles, and we certainly, life is suffering. I'm a Buddhist, so I do believe in that concept. But when it comes to race in America, really what we're seeing is an expression of frustration and really abhorrent, just distaste for our past and our history. And we're in that generation of flux right now. So I think that we are really making racial strides in our country. I think that we are working to not identify race. You said earlier that you try and live your life outside of that spectrum, or you don't see race. And that is something that white folks are doing more and more now. But the unfortunate reality is
Taking it the completely wrong direction, dude. I'm letting you know that as a fact. The people are thinking like, "Oh, you can't say that because that's going to offend somebody." There's a difference between looking at race and holding it with a pillow, and looking at race is just something in ourselves that we haven't come to context with. We don't truly understand the fact that like
Yeah.
people that become too sensitive on things. I'm mostly hitting at the examples of comedians. Okay, they're afraid to say stuff on stage because they know it's going to offend people. Then you hear Dave Chappelle special where he's like, I don't give a fuck who you are, I'm going to say this, I don't care if you get offended by it, it doesn't matter. And
Well,
people,
the one thing that Dave Chappelle is doing, and comedy is the place for that, right? Like that is where that should live. Comedy exists to push those buttons. It's there to point out things, and a good comedian can say abhorrent things and make you laugh. That's the real work. But going back is we do have this issue of race in America, and the reality of it is that people of color in this country don't get to live without race. There is no moment where they just get to exist outside of their race. I have friends that a couple of my friends just took their family to Africa for the first time, and they're a black family. And one of the things that they said when they returned was it was crazy to just be a person, because in America, no matter what, you are a black person at any given moment, whether that's socially or bureaucratically or whatever is defining you as such. Something is defining you as a black person. And whenever they go to Africa, right, my friends go to Africa and they experience this culture where everyone's black, so therefore no one's black. They are able to live outside of their race in the way that you just described. That's the difference. Is in our culture, we don't have the means yet to get there. I think we're on track to get there. Like you said, we do have this generation of kids who want to look past it and want to live past it. But we do need to remain sensitive to the fact that privilege does exist. White privilege is a real thing. And there are people that don't get to live outside of their race, even if they want to. You know, there are people that
yeah,
are going to be seen as black people first and
for
foremost,
sure.
always. So I
And
think that's where a lot of the frustration comes from. I think that really what we're seeing is a response to, like I said, the history that we're dealing with. For the first time, we have the full picture of our country's history, and it's sorted. It's not. I am an American, and I'm happy to be an American by all means, but we do have some history to deal with. We do have some issues that we need to deal with, and the only way to deal with those is to be honest. And as a country, as a nation, as one people, because I really do believe that is the way to progress, and the way to a better life for everybody is unity and standing together, not against each other. But we do need to reconcile with these feelings. We do have a lot of kids that are upset about the way that things went down. And as white people, I think that it is important to keep in mind that we have a generation of kids whose grandparents were being hosed down in the street by police officers. You know, that is a real part of our history, and
well,
we
let me
need
let me
to
tell you something.
remain sensitive for the time being.
Let me say something. There's also things, there was women didn't really get rights until around like the 80s, 90s. They didn't really get anything going for them, doing stuff of them sorts. But people are not taking it into the aspect of realism anymore. There was shit that in our country, not even in our country, in people's human nature that we've had to learn through experience that that's not right. Okay. We've come to that point now. But the problem is everyone still holds that to account. There are people that still hold grudges for what their family has experienced, even though they've never experienced it themselves. I understand that and I get that. But I don't think if you're holding that and you're making justifications, whether you're going to fight somebody in the street just because, oh, back in the day, whatever, this happened. Okay, shit happens and we learn from that. Now, that's coming from my side.
No, and key word there is learn, because I am a leftist. I do believe in the left. I do vote left. I am a Democrat, lifelong. And I do see a trend happening in the left that I'm not crazy about, and that is this super polarized thought. I do think that love should lead. I do think that unity is the solution. But what we do need to start doing is educating. So like you said, there is this history. There are these kids that have this family trauma and these generational stories and traumas that are being taught to them, whether they're aware of it or not, and the reaction to that should be education and should be some sort of insight into each other's lives. I think that exposure to each other and each other's stories is what will unify us ultimately. But on the left, you have this, and the right, you have this symptom that's happening of it's your fault, it's your fault. Even within the left, you have, well, you can't say that because you're this or that or this or that. And ultimately, I think that the problem isn't those thoughts or those ideas. I think that it's the direction of it. We're directing all of our frustration and all of what, in air quotes, they're calling the work or the activism that they're doing, into castigation, into making people. The left has just stolen the tactics of past oppressors. You're just using these things to maintain power and shut people out instead of using this position to educate.
Let me hop in here real quick. What the left is swinging completely right. They're doing stuff that the right used to be doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you see the right swinging a little bit left. Now the problem is we're too afraid to say stuff, whether it's a joke or not. If you go to a comedy show and someone says an outlandish joke, if they're a white comedian, it doesn't matter what color they are. For me, I treat people on respect that I've been given. I don't look at color, because I can tell you right now, I can watch a black comedy special and I can laugh at every single bit to it when it talks about relatable experiences, like having a crack in the microwave that when you had to turn something on, you had to run to the other room so you didn't get any radioactive damage to yourself. I had that. I realized that everything you're talking about, like that mom had to give you the briefing in the grocery store, or before, when you're in the car, before you go into the grocery store, that shopping cart hits her in the back of the heel. My mom did that. Okay. I came from it's not about color. It's not about that. It's about poverty. It's about those types of things. That stuff was the relatable stuff. But that whole audience was black. There was no white people in there. And I've had friends of mine that are completely ignorant that tell me that's just because you had a black childhood. No, it's not. It's called about having an impoverished one. Sadly, black culture, all these types of things, race is a thing. It does exist. But the concept of those people are struggling and working very, very hard to get anything for themselves, where a lot of white people are given stuff. That's a fact. Okay. But
yeah,
you got to understand that that's not it's only seen as a race thing because the priority amount of people that experience that impoverished lifestyle are black. But let me tell you something, having a mom that worked 2 jobs, that tried to raise a couple kids, being able to have the sufficient time. I basically, my dad was involved too, but both my parents worked 2 separate jobs, didn't have a healthy relationship. So I was constantly by myself. My brother was older. I never had anybody to teach me the right ways to do things. I lived a lot of my time alone, and I knew what I had to do. I knew what I was told. I had rules I had to follow. Like, hey, nobody's going to be home at this time. Make sure you don't open up the door for anybody. And I mean anybody. You make sure that door's locked up like Fort Knox, like Lavelle Crawford said it best. And I realized that's only seen as a black childhood, because they're the ones going through that because they don't have the ability to make their lives any better, even though they're putting in so much effort to change that. But coming from that feeling, knowing what that was like, I was able to relate to people. And I understand it's just people going through hard shit. And when it really pisses me off when people look at someone of their skin color and they immediately feel uncomfortable around them. I feel comfortable around everybody. As long as you treat me respect, I'm going to treat you with respect back. And that's not a giant good for you in my way. No, that's just because people are people. We look different. That's a fact. Okay. You look different from me. I look different from some other person. The whole concept of we need to understand where we draw the sensitive barrier. Okay. There is things that are going to be offensive, but that doesn't mean they're not funny. And there's a point to where that offensiveness turns into a hate thing. When it comes to the concept of you can't even crack a joke. Like I asked my buddy, what's the one, we're shooting the shit over podcast, and he brings up what's your favorite fried chicken? And I'm like, did you just bring that up because you're black? And it was a complete little joke. And he started laughing. And it's but for that second I was like, did I just say something offensive? And then it's no, he completely just forgot about it, because he's my best friend. He's my friend. You know what I mean? We're able to relate, and we're totally able to forget that race boundary. That's why it's weird when you see a parent who has a young child and they bring home, or not bring home, but they have a friend that's coming over and it's of a different race. You're whoa. And that kid's completely ignorant to it. It's because kids aren't born with racism. That stuff gets developed through society and the way we choose to hold on to it, so accountable for things. We need to let that shit go and realize that's in the past. Let's make a better fucking future. And if anything, if you got a problem with the way someone looks, how they might look different from you, see that as something in your own life you need to fix.
Yeah. And I mean, I do agree in the sense that because I grew up with little money, teen parents, all of that stuff. So we struggled pretty hard. And I didn't have a lot. And that's kind of where I found art and poetry. It was a very affordable means of entertainment for young Daniel. But what we do, like you said, you do have these common struggles. We do have these results of poverty, things like violence and gang violence and drug use, and all of those things go hand in hand with poverty in this country, not with a specific race. And we do, like you said, we do have these communities. Socially, I think our racial issues have made leaps and bounds. We socially are getting to a place where we aren't uncomfortable with different races. We all have friends that are different races. Again, exposure, I think, is the big key in all of this. We need to expose people to different lifestyles and different types of people. But what we do see in the Black community and the people of color, I am also biracial, so I'm half white and I'm half native leaning. I'm Mexican, but a lot of that is Puebla blood. And these struggles aren't being sensitives. We're not being sensitive to that struggle. It's easy for us to say, hey, I had these struggles too because I was poor. And really what I think that people of color in this country are asking for sensitivity for, whether they realize it or not, is for the struggle that only exists in those communities, there is an oppression that only happens to brown, Black, and colored people in this country. And that's ultimately what I think that we need to address and we need to be sensitive to. There is an extra element to poverty in this country if you're Black or brown. There is an extra element to how you're being oppressed or the social pressure on you in this country if you're Black or brown. And I think that sensitivity towards that is the key. But I also think on the flip side, the left needs to educate. We need to be sharing those feelings. You need to be telling people about the Black experience in this country. We need to be talking about how it's different to be a young brown kid, a poor young brown kid being raised in this country, as opposed to a poor white kid in this country, because there are extra elements of oppression applied to the brown folks. But the way to surmount that, the way to get past that, is to educate each other and to make people understand that this exists so that we can work past it, so that it does become something that we are working to get past and not something that we're living in, if that makes sense. Because there is this struggle culture right now. There is this people want to be likened to the struggle because it validates them socially.
Which doesn't make sense, because anybody that actually goes through something like that, there are formative moments. I wouldn't give back any of my bad times I've experienced in my life. I wouldn't give back any of the times I was bullied, any of the times I was alone, any of those times, because I know how hard my parents worked to make sure that I had a house over my head. And I know how those moments are what created the person I am today. I wouldn't trade those back. And
Absolutely.
I think more people want to be like, I lived the struggle, when their internet goes out in their house. You don't know what that is. You don't know, like, they tell you like that. Like, it's like someone took away their leg. I'm like, do you know what it's like to kind of live off nothing, not having internet, maybe turning on the TV and seeing just static on the television, and you think it's fucking snowing outside? Like, no.
Well, that's the thing, though. There is this spectrum to struggle in this country, and we need to stop belittling struggle. I think that everyone's struggle is theirs and it is real to them. And whether,
well, you shouldn't glorify it as a way of like a rite of passage. You shouldn't use it.
No, you shouldn't be celebrating it by any means. We should be working to get past it. But my point ultimately being, though, that I do think that on the side of white folks in this country, when it does come to race issues, all that needs to be done, really, and it's quite simple for us. We have the easy part of it all. We need to learn, just be quiet and take opportunity to be exposed to these cultures and these struggles as education, and listen and learn, and not form opinions, and not even, it doesn't really matter what our opinions are about the Black community.
It's all about being open-minded. I think
it's about being sensitive, though. I think that this country owes Black folks an apology for slavery. I think
we can't keep apologizing over and over.
It never happened. There was never a public governmental decree of absolution. Whenever England abolished slavery 100 years before us, they publicly apologized for it. And there's little things like that that I think should have been happening that didn't happen. And now we're dealing with the repercussions of that, to where we have this generation of kids, white kids, that are like, that's fucked up and slavery's wrong. And I am sorry that that happened, but it's not the government. And ultimately, I think that that is where our fight is. So really quick, just to wrap up that point though, we do have that easy side of it. I think the work there socially for white folks is to just be sensitive and quiet and learn. And unfortunately, the work for colored folks in this country is a little bit more arduous, because they have to manage educating. They have to share this experience and not do it in a accusatory or aggressive way. And that's hard to do when you're dealing with this trauma or these facts of your history or your people's history. It's easy for me, at least, to see why you would be angry. But we do need to come from a place of love and unity and not castigation. So again, the hard part for people of color, unfortunately, and it is hard because they are tasked with educating a country about the repercussions of their history, and that's not a fun thing to do. I don't want to have to fucking educate people.
The fact is, if you're holding on to the past like that, you're not going to be able to promote a better future. If you want to,
I don't think so, though. I don't think that that's what's happening. I don't think that they're holding on to the past.
Let me get in here, okay? When it comes on to things like you're saying, apologize for what happened in the past. I just believe that the whole aspect of you need to work forward.
I didn't say that. I said the government should formally apologize for slavery.
I do agree with that. Then I about to say, if all people should apologize for the past, I don't feel like I should apologize for something that happened that I was not involved with, and maybe my family was not even involved.
No, of course not. And that's what we have happening, though, is you have kids that are being asked to do that. And it's both of those points I'm making leading to this greater point, I guess, that it's not us versus us. And that's kind of the mentality that we have in this country right now. Is we're all poor, we're all struggling. There is a minority of people in this country that are making the majority of money in this country. Corporate lobbying and control is real in this country. So there is things that need to be changed, and it's not at the social level as much as it is at the bureaucratic level. We need to get actively involved in our democracy. We need to be voting. We need to be educating ourselves. We need to be combating the actual people that are in control, because like you said, we all come from similar upbringings. We all have similar stories of struggle.
Yeah.
So why are we yelling at each other instead of yelling at the people that are putting us in this position?
I agree.
Which I do believe is ultimately the government and the rich, the wealthy.
I was misunderstanding. I thought you were saying that like white people should have to pay. I was like, whoa.
No. But I do think that white folks in this country do need to be more sensitive. We do need to find a means to, honestly, simply said, just shut the fuck up and listen.
Yeah. Well, we're not doing it in the right way, sadly. Just talking with some of the white people, they get a little bit, they take the sensitive barrier and they push it a little bit too close to what is actually meant to be offensive and what isn't meant to be offensive, especially when they go out against comedians about certain things.
And comedy is a whole different realm. I do think that I do believe in social sensitivity. I do like even edit and censor my own work at times for that, but I'm not a comedian. You know, that there needs to be a space for comedy that is outside of what you can and cannot say, because part of comedy is saying things you cannot say in a funny way. So it by definition needs to exist in that bubble, you know?
Yeah, there's a difference between being like incorrect and then there's a difference between just cracking a joke. But like I agree with you now, because I was misunderstanding what you were saying. I thought you were saying like white people need to pay I was like, no, the government definitely needs to do some type of apology for sure. The government, but that's with anything too. The government, Australian government, all these types of people. It's so easy. If you ever look up government experiments, government trials, all these types of things, it's so easy to see why they choose the people they choose for the experiments is because they look nothing like the dominant population.
Yeah.
It's now a statistical fact in America that white people are now becoming a minority based on the fact of all the illegal immigration that is going on now and all these types of sorts. I don't think when it comes to building a wall, all these types of shit that people are 100% for, they understand the true aspect of stuff. I think it's ridiculous that it takes a person like Gavin McInnes, a Canadian guy, $5,000 and still 5 years, and he still has not become a citizen yet. He's going through the proper channels. That's not right that it should take that long for someone going in through the right way to go through it. That explains why people try and sneak over there. No one's got the time for that shit. No one's got the time to go through all the government processes, all the signing of papers.
Well, the resources, not time. It's more about resources than money, obviously.
Exactly. It's like when
you have folks in Mexico that were never taught to read or write. So how are they expected to fill out paperwork to get somewhere?
It's all about understanding their perspective. They're coming over here. I have buddies that are from that country, that are from Mexico, from different parts of Honduras, whatever. And they have family down there. I had a buddy that just recently went back on vacation, and he was telling me about how the experience it was seeing the whole family and not seeing the tour side when everybody goes over to Mexico. He talks about like, it's a sense of wholeness and a connection with the community again, where America has lost that. And that's seen in very, very heavily populated government run systems. The fact is the government sucks. Okay. I love it, but it sucks. The fact that it's able to give me freedom of speech is like the one good thing. But the whole concept of we're not doing things right. We're living way too much of a media-filled life. The fact is we need to go reconnected back into our roots with people again. Race is never going to not exist. Like racism's never going to not exist as long as we focus on our census test. It tells you what to circle. If you're white, you're black, or whatever. No, there should only
that's not true, though. I think that racism always exists just because of people.
There should only be two boxes to fill in that census test. That should be I am not a robot and I am a robot, because that's the only thing we really need to fucking worry about is Skynet and that Terminator shit happening, because I'm 100% thinking machines are going to get to a point where they're just get fed up. But when it comes to being realistic, when it comes to racism, some dude that's racist, and he's like Gavin McInnes used this example that, you know, he's watching a football game or something. Some dude comes up and goes, man, that team fucking sucks. And if that guy looks over and he's in agreement with that guy, he's not going to not engage in conversation with that guy because of the color of his skin. And if you do, you're a piece of shit, because that shouldn't happen. That should not stop a conversation. I would talk to that person 100%, whether you're white, black, even if you say my team sucked. I want to have a conversation. But with other people, the normal amount of people, they look over, they're not going to engage themselves in that conversation. It's like, oh yeah, that team does suck. And then you look over and see the guy's a different skin color. Oh, I'm not going to associate with you because you're of a different ethnicity. Hell no. That's like the stereotypical white person. I'm like, no, that is not what it is at all. A lot of people nowadays are very, very open. A lot of people are having mixed relationships. Myself, half my past girlfriends have been mixed. And I'm fine with that. I don't see race as a thing. I see who I'm attracted to as to who I'm attracted to. I don't think it's a thing like, oh, it's my opportunity as a white man. I need to learn how to. No, I don't see that at all. I like who I like, and I'm interested. I go after what I'm interested in. People need to start thinking in that mindset rather than we need to be aware. Yeah, you should be aware that some shit happened in the past, but don't hold it to the fact that you need to go out of your way to literally make these people or make whoever feel like royalty and treat them completely different. No. Treat them like fucking people. Treat them like you would someone that was in your family. Treat them like another aspect of yourself, because that's who we are. We're all people, and our differences make us unique.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think that that is true, right? Absolutely. We do need to be treated. And the social, like I said, the social part of race, we are really overcoming. Our generation, within half a generation, normalized homosexuality. We have completely normalized race issues in this country. Like you said, like you describe, if you are in a room with somebody, you are not socially uncomfortable, you can engage, and that didn't exist 50 years ago. So we've made those strides, but frankly, I think that's the easy work. That's the work that comes naturally just through exposure. We were raised with, like you said, most of us date a lot of different people of a lot of different ethnic backgrounds, and that's just because we're American and they're here and we're all on top of each other and we've been exposed to each other and we're not afraid of each other because of that exposure. And that's the easy work. That's kids do that naturally. We all do that naturally anyways. So we're really just tapping into our natural state with all of that. The hard work, though, is there is a lot of real oppression that's happening at a higher level, and it is happening towards Black and brown people at a disproportionate rate. I think that things like the prison pipeline and like the prison industrial complex is real for white and Black people, and it is happening in disproportionate numbers with people of color. And those facts are true. There is this extra element that's happening, and that's what we need to be fighting against. This isn't about getting along with each other at this point, because we all get along. And like you said, unless you're a real piece of shit, you're not going to be socially uncomfortable with somebody because they're a different race than you.
Yeah, you should definitely look at that uncomfortability as something you need to fix in yourself. I mean,
absolutely. But I do think, though, that what we do need to remain doing is being sensitive to this community in whatever way we can, not judging or placing a value on it morally or socially, and saying I don't see the value in not saying these things or saying these things, but just kind of doing it and letting it pass. It's a request that they're asking for. Sensitivity is, I think, ultimately what people are asking for, and we just need to do that now. It's time to just be sensitive. It's time to just listen and learn and keep an open heart, and not liken these struggles to the past, because when your parents are oppressed horrifically and then they raised kids, generational progress is how this country works. I come from poor, struggling white folks. My parents both kind of saw the trappings in that lifestyle and worked their asses off to get myself out of that situation. So I was raised in a poor community. My uncles were all gangbanging or selling drugs or the like. And my mom decided to get me out. So they worked their ass off. We moved to a nicer neighborhood. We did all of the things to ensure my success. So now for me, it's a little bit easier and I do a little bit better. And then hopefully for my kids, it will get a little bit easier and they'll do a little bit better. And that's the way that this country works in general, for the most part. And it's important to keep in mind that these people aren't far enough removed from real physical oppression in the streets to not be affected by it. It did happen in the past, but there's nothing to say that those lessons weren't taught to them. There's nothing to say that those lessons shouldn't have been taught to them. Yeah. If you were hosed down in the street by police officers, it's safe to say that you're going to breed a healthy distrust of police officers in your kids and therefore grandkids. And that's what we're seeing. We're just seeing progress is very slow, and it takes a long time, and it takes several generations to make real permanent change. And I think we are making real permanent change in this country. I think white folks are frustrated because they feel like they've already made the change socially and within themselves. And I do think that that's true. But again, that's the easy work. And now it's time to do the hard work, which is to make sure that all people are represented equally and all people have equal opportunity in this country. I do believe in equal opportunity first, and what you do with it is on you. Because like you said, individuals are real. So
I think we can all learn from the Dr. Seuss book, and also what we've been told through kindergarten. That fact is, you have the ability to become whoever you want to become. And the concept of that shouldn't be limited on race. That shouldn't be limited on anything. That shouldn't be, it's the land that we call it the land of opportunity, but the land of opportunity seems a little bit out of reach when the fact that we still restrict so many different things. I think the struggle doesn't have a requirement of what race you have to be. Anybody that is experiencing the struggle can understand that. The factor is it is seen as the dominant population of people happen to be of a certain ethnicity. But honestly, we can sit here and talk about Black culture. We can sit here and talk about white culture. We can sit here and talk about whatever you want. But the whole concept of the real struggling race that has it worse than everybody is Asians, man. They have it worse than anybody.
They do, and that's something that I speak a lot about. My co-host on Penn Clique,
requirements for freaking getting into school because they have a dominant population of Asian kids, so now they have to work harder just to be able to go into Harvard. That's ridiculous.
It is, and there is a very dangerous racism that's brewing towards Asian people in this country because their culture lends to it as well. Most Asian cultures do come from a culture of you keep your head down and you work and you work and you work, and that's how you get out. And so they're not as outspoken. They're not as apt to speak up and say that that's wrong. So that's taken advantage of in this country. And we do see that happening. And there is a real racism that's happening. if someone publicly did black voice or did some sort of racist thing against black or brown people, you better believe that black and brown people are going to stand up and say that's unacceptable. But
Kind of person.
comedians make racist Asian voices all the time, and it's just
Nobody
laughed at.
says shit. Nobody says
Yeah.
They just let it go. And even the Asian people are like, that's true. I know that's my uncle. They do something stupid like that, like crack a joke on pawn a joke. And I'm like, I think in their head, they think, I'm going to be 35 years old. I'm going to be retired with 4 companies. I'm going to get my life set, and you're still going to be struggling. That's how they see it. They see it. They work hard, and it shows results. And the fact that we make it harder for them to benefit from working so much harder than us that's ridiculous. And I think anybody that does that they're sick. First of all, you should be able to have equal opportunity as much as anybody. We talk about it so much, but it seems like it's not happening. It's one thing we need to fix definitely in our system and our government in general. But like, I wanted to bring this all back around to what we're talking about with poetry. The amazing thing about an entertainment or art form, whether it's painting, whether it's types of writing, whether it's a type of spoken word, it's amazing to see that it doesn't restrict on your color. It doesn't see that. It focuses on the actual like content, the actual creative process of writing it. The fact that if whether it's a black poet or whether it's a white poet going on the stage, no matter what race you are, as a listener, you're able to hear that, and you're able to hear the pain if a person has truly experienced it or not. And that's what I think is awesome about poetry and writing in any really art form in general that truly expresses creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. And we spoke a lot about a lot of different things already, exposure and education and all of these things, and social revolution and all of that. All of that comes from the arts. That doesn't come from society. That comes from the arts. That's where the inspiration for all of that change comes, because like you said, the arts is this meritocracy that's based on being genuine and based on expressing your struggle as genuine, or your sense of expression as genuinely as you can. So you do have this transformative medium where it connects us all universally. You can't escape how you feel when you hear a good song, you know, and we all kind of feel the same way when we hear that song. So the arts is transformative. The arts is where I think all of change comes from ultimately. That's where we start to get the little inklings of change, and the little ideas, and all of that pushes forward society more than I think we even realize.
I agree with you 100%. I'm glad we can kind of understand each other a little bit better. It took a little while to get us there. It seemed like it was going to like 2 different sides, but it actually came around to the same thing. We both think the same when it comes
I
to
think so. And I think we are on different sides. I don't think that we completely disagree with or agree with a lot of the things we're saying.
Well, that's what makes good conversation too. The fact
yeah,
that
and that's the one thing that I'm not seeing in the left that I'd like to see more, is that as a Buddhist, I don't believe that anyone's thoughts are right or wrong. So myself included.
I'm open to 100% interpretation. I've heard people say some stuff where I'm like, what? But then they go and explain it to me like, shit, that could be real. We actually could have came from Mars. And like, but like, it's all, I think everything's all a possibility because we don't know sufficient evidence yet. And even when there's facts that come out 5 years later, that stuff gets proven wrong anyway. Like,
and you know, we don't get anything from disagreeing and shutting each other out. There is nothing to be had from stopping conversations with each other. So I think that this is the big part that's missing in the left, is you have to keep your heart and mind open, your heart first. You know, we're so quick to judge or to assign value to people because of ideas.
Well, sadly, everyone holds their opinion in such high account. When you look at the political parties, the main thing that they're doing wrong is they're not even taking the time to understand each other. It's literally a bunch of people on different sides just screaming and yelling at each other while like you're watching this argument. Like nobody can understand what anybody's saying. Nobody's talking rationally. Nobody's walking up and saying one thing, letting them say their full thing, and then someone else come up and say their full thing. Half the times, like that's a perfect representation to the way people act today. So many times you get into a conversation with someone, it turns into like an argument or a disagreement. Next thing you know, they start cutting you off and immediately doing these types of things. You're like, let me finish the fucking point. You see it in the
Yeah.
presidential debates. I mean, half the time the guy's trying to explain himself and he's got a time limit to get his point out there. And then the dude's cutting him off. Wrong. He's wrong. He's not a good person. Not a good person. And the guy's like letting that go. And the next thing you know, it's like, you have 20 seconds left. He's like, what? Like, you just let that interrupt my whole thing. He took a minute and a half of what I was trying to say, and now I only have 20 seconds left. So you have 5 seconds now. Shit. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have time to express himself.
Yeah, and honestly, all of it, the frustration, the anger, all of that is ineffective. And I am working for change. I am working to help my people, being Americans. I would like to see this country be the best country that it can be. And I want to win. So it doesn't work. Frustration and anger doesn't work. If I could quietly convince some racist guy that he's wrong through love and through me being sensitive to him, then I'm going to win. I'm going to win that argument. I'm going to come out and he's going to have an understanding of the left that is of, or just of whatever I'm arguing, that it is right. And I want to win the argument. And anger and frustration and all of that is motivation. That's certainly something that keeps me going. I am angry whenever I do read about things or I do discover things that I don't like to hear. But that's not how you win an argument. We're trying to effectively change this nation because we as a generation are all saying we don't like the way that it is. And the only way to radically do that permanently, I do believe, is love and unity. I do think that we should be working with each other patiently and lovingly, because that is where real change comes from. It doesn't come from anger and aggression. That change only lasts as long as you can keep people convinced.
And the
real love and unity doesn't go away.
And the true people that understand that are people that especially adopt kids and have, like, the kids that grow up in those adoption homes, having a colored brother, having a different ethnicity or a different gender person that is.
Yeah, that's really funny that you would bring that up, actually, because so my mom got pregnant whenever she was a teenager. My dad actually left the scene pretty early. My mom kind of ran him out, but she met a man and started dating a man while she was pregnant, and that man would go on to adopt me at around the age of 4 or 5. And they're both white. So my biological father is a brown guy from San Gabriel Valley, California. And I was raised as this little brown kid with 2 white parents. So very early on for me, I realized that identity was fluid, that whatever you may think you are, you're choosing to think you are that. And we are all actually just one greater thing beyond whatever we assign ourselves as, you know?
This is a crazy story I found out. My buddy, he's the 3rd person ever on my podcast. And he told me, like, on the podcast, he's like, dude, so guess what I found out? And we always crack jokes on him because he's like, he's mixed. And they thought, his mom told him he was Native American. His dad was all Native American. That's why he looks that way, which it makes sense. The way his hair is, the way his kind of features are, he looks like you could say, yeah, you're Native American. But deep down inside me, I was like, dude, you have a black dad for sure. There's no ways he's Native American. I'm sorry, bro, but it's not even like a joke. It's fact. And his mom told him for 20 something years that his dad was Native American. And then the day of, he went to go do my podcast. He told me, like, right before we started, he goes, dude, my mom came out today and told me that my dad is actually black. I'm like, are you serious? She started showing me pictures and everything. I'm like, dude, I fucking knew it. And you called me racist. I was like, I knew it, dude. I just felt it deep down. I've had friends that have been secretly hiding that they were gay, and then they come out on my podcast. It's like, I was just uncomfortable. I was like, dude, I always knew it, because I know what it's like to hide yourself from people. I was afraid to ever talk because of the fact that people would call me annoying. I know what that's like. That's what I'm saying. You can make it, it's a relatable experience when you go through it yourself. You know, that's what people can understand when it comes to anything like the struggle, anything like that.
And all of it, I think, is cyclical. I don't think that any one struggle is completely genuine. I think that we're all living under the same pressures. And when you put certain pressures on people, they react in similar ways. Similar situations grow out of that similar pressure, you know? So our struggles are all universal because our oppressors are universal. And again, that is who we're targeting here. This isn't about like each other and trying to get, because what does that do? What does it do whenever you yell at somebody socially? It does nothing.
It
So
takes the little minor problems in your life and puts them out onto somebody else, sadly.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that more people need to focus on like what problem is intimate, like what is right in front of you, immediate, and realize that's not going to be there forever. But people, sadly, we hold on to it, and the next thing you know, you're that person that's yelling at somebody in a store over how bad your day was. That's why when I see people freak out at other people in stores, and if someone freaks out on me, I just look at them. I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, you probably went through a lot of stuff today, and honestly,
Yeah.
I'm not angry like you are, and I understand your aggression. So I'm not even going to feed into this. I'm just going to realize that you're going through some stuff, and I'm not going to label you in my head as an asshole, even though you did act that way towards the one time I met you. And obviously, first impressions are everything. But I'm going to tell him, like, I understand. I get it. And when I see someone yell at somebody in line for having more than 12 items, I have the same thought running in my head. Like, you have 50 fucking items and you're in a 12 item or less thing. Really? But I say to my head, but I realize that's something wrong with myself. And I realize any rush that I'm in, it can wait, because this is not going to bother me 5 minutes from now when I'm out of the store. It's not going to bother me later in life. But the sad thing is we take these problems they overwhelm us too fast. We don't know how to communicate anymore in a world of isolation. We talk about media being able to expand us to different reaches of the globe, help even make us be able to talk together. We're still disconnected from the true aspect that makes people human, face-to-face conversations, all these types of things that really bring us that connection. We have a social skill. We have a social meter. It's like Sims. We need a hug every now and again after months of not talking to people. We need to have that connection with people again. We need to find out what's going on in not only other people's lives, but our own lives and truly our own family's lives. I couldn't tell you a thing any of my family members are going on in their lives right now, only on the concept of the communication is gone.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the focus for me, for myself, and the work that I do is to build community, because that is what's missing. American culture is missing a sense of connection and oneness and unity. Like I said, I've said it like 5 times already in this interview. I do think that unity and community are the answer. And that doesn't mean complete adherence to one idea. We need to be able to embrace the fact that communities are diverse and differ in thought and race and all of these things in that country, in our country, because of our history and just unity. Like you said, there is, if you know the person that cut in front of you in line, or you know the person that is in the checkout line with too much shit, then it's easier to forgive them because they're part of your community. They're part of your heart. There, you have some sort of connection to them. And that is the thing that's missing, is we don't feel connected to the person at the checkout line enough to make that leap that you just described.
I think it's crazy the fact that we might be from two completely different places, but we can think along the same basis when it comes to the understanding and compassion that it comes to the aspect of just people and humans in general.
Yeah, and that is the answer. That's the clear answer that we see socially happening in our generation, where it's like, I'm not racist. I grew up around brown folks and black folks and Asian folks and all kinds of different people, and I don't feel any certain way about them particularly. That part's easy. It's the cultural part that we still have some hangups about, that we don't want people speaking Spanish here or whatever. There's all kinds of different cultural hangups that we still are stuck on. And again, the easy work's done. The social work's easy. The easy part's done. We already know that people are people and that all people deserve respect and kindness. It's just doing the greater work now, because to actually change this country, to revolutionize or undo the damage that our country has suffered, we do have a lot of work ahead of us. There's a lot of hard work that's going to need to be done bureaucratically. We're going to need to vote. We're going to need to be involved. And it's hard, but like you said, community first. That's where it all starts and comes from,
It's all about pursuing something. Don't look at it as being hard. Look at it as a process. It might take some time for us to get there, but we will eventually get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are we all fighting for if we get there and we all hate each other? So
exactly. A house divided cannot stand. Abraham Lincoln said it best.
Absolutely. And that is my work. That is what I think we should all be doing. Whether you agree or disagree with somebody, you should love them first.
Thank you so much for being on my podcast, Daniel. It was awesome having you on, man. I want to give you a minute here at the end to be able to promote your stuff so people can find your awesome content.
Yeah, I appreciate you. You can find my comedy show, The Chubby Fat, wherever you get podcasts. Just search Chubby Fat, normal spelling. Pen Click, the most poppin' poetry podcast in the known galaxy. We are on YouTube. Go on YouTube, type in Pen Click, PENCLIQUE. We're on Instagram, same thing, CLIQUE. So Pen Click, get it? It's a little pun there. But yeah, we're trying to get pop and poetry content out there. We're trying to expose people to new art and new artists and new ideas and new concepts in a fun and dynamic way. So we out here. Go check me out.
Keep the creative juices flowing. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, and stay tuned for another episode.